The security guard did not touch me until my mother-in-law said he has access to donor accounts. We were standing in a service corridor behind the ballroom at the Marlowe Hotel. On the other side of the wall, nearly 500 people were eating dessert under chandeliers, while a string quartet played an arrangement of a song I could not place. In the corridor, 2 hotel security officers, the foundation's attorney, my wife, and Margaret Hale were looking at me as if I had become dangerous during the last 15 minutes. The attorney held a printed transaction report. $74,860 had been redirected from the gala settlement account to a vendor profile connected to my tax identification number. The change had been made at 6:14 that evening. My user credentials appeared in the audit log. My phone had received the authentication code. Margaret's voice was calm. "Ethan, if there is an explanation, this is the time." I looked at my wife, Grace. She was wearing the dark green dress our daughter had helped her choose. Her face had lost all color. "Did you move the money?" she asked. "No, your login did. I was on the ballroom floor at 6:14. "Oh," Margaret said. "That does not mean your phone was." My phone was in my jacket pocket. I took it out slowly. The attorney said, "Do not open anything." One of the guards stepped closer. I handed him the phone. Grace looked from me to her mother, then back to me. "Ethan," she said, "tell me you did not do this because of the clients you lost." That question hurt more than the accusation. She knew the last 6 months had been bad. She knew my consulting business had lost its largest payroll account. She knew I had borrowed against a line of credit without telling her until the statement arrived. She also knew I had spent 12 years investigating financial misconduct. I said, "I did not take the money." Margaret folded her arms. "Then you should cooperate." The hotel guard asked me to follow him. I walked past the ballroom door. Through the narrow opening, I saw my 15-year-old daughter Lily sitting alone at our table. She had not yet noticed me. On stage, a photograph of a little boy holding a paintbrush filled the screen. A donor was talking about trust. "My name is Ethan Hale. I was 42 when my mother-in-law accused me of stealing from a children's arts foundation in a hotel full of people who already believed money explained every choice I made." I did not grow up around foundations. My father was a freight dispatcher, my mother worked nights at a nursing home, and I studied accounting because numbers did not require anyone to introduce you. After college, I joined the State Inspector General's office. My job was not dramatic. I reviewed grant reimbursements, payroll allocations, vendor bids, and invoices that had been photocopied too many times. Most mistakes were ordinary. A duplicate payment, a mileage form signed on the wrong line, a nonprofit using the wrong cost center. Sometimes the mistakes formed a pattern. That was what I was good at seeing. Not one large theft, a habit, a person who always approved expenses on Friday afternoons. A vendor whose invoice numbers increased but dates moved backward. A grant director who split purchases into amounts just below the approval limit. At 33, I found false attendance records in a politically sensitive job training contract. My supervisor called them enrollment errors. I kept looking and was removed from the case for communication concerns. The state settled quietly. My next review praised my technical work and questioned my judgment about organizational relationships. That sentence followed me. I left public service 2 years later and opened a small compliance and payroll practice. The work paid less at first. It also allowed me to choose clients who wanted answers. I met Grace Hale during a review of a community theater grant. She was the development director. The theater had not stolen anything. It had used restricted donations to repair a leaking roof because a city reimbursement arrived late. Grace was embarrassed. I told her the truth was less expensive when written down early. She said, "You make that sound like a moral philosophy. It is mostly an accounting policy." She laughed. We had coffee after the final meeting. Grace came from a family whose name appeared on buildings. Her late father had built a commercial real estate company, and her mother, Margaret, chaired the Hale Family Foundation. Grace had spent her adult life raising money for institutions that treated her family as both donors and public property. She drove an old Volvo 8 takeout on the floor and still knew which fork belonged to the fish course. I had been divorced once. My first marriage ended without a villain. Lily was 7. Her mother, Rebecca, moved to Cincinnati after remarrying. We shared custody as evenly as distance allowed. Grace never tried to become Lily's mother. She became the adult who remembered when the school needed poster board and who could sit through 3 hours of debate team practice without looking at her phone. Lily loved her cautiously, then fully. Margaret treated Lily well. That mattered to me. With me, Margaret was polite. At first, she called my work bookkeeping. She introduced me as Grace's husband, who has his own little practice. At dinners, she asked whether consulting was stable enough for a family. When Grace defended me, Margaret smiled as if the defense proved the concern. The cuts were small. I told myself small cuts did not require a response. Then my business lost the Meridian account. Meridian Health Services had been 40% of my revenue. A private equity firm bought it and moved payroll compliance in-house. I had 60 days' notice. I cut office expenses. I stopped paying myself for 1 month. I used our home equity line for $30,000 to keep my 2 employees through tax season. I planned to tell Grace after I replaced the client. I did not replace the client. She learned about the line when the bank sent a paper statement. And we had our worst argument in years, not because I borrowed the money, because I decided alone that she did not need to know. You always say transparency matters, she said. It does, for everyone except you. I was protecting payroll. You were protecting yourself from looking scared. She was right. I hated her for saying it. For 2 weeks, we spoke only about Lily groceries and schedules. Margaret learned about the loan. Grace said she did not tell her. I believed her. Margaret had relationships at the bank. The next time I saw her, she said, "A man with your background should understand leverage." I do. Then you understand why people become concerned when a consultant borrows against the family home to fund a business. It is our home. Grace's down payment came from her trust. I said nothing. She added, "I am not criticizing, I am observing." Margaret believed changing a sentence's label changed what it did. 3 months later, the Hale Youth Arts Foundation's controller had a stroke. Her name was Denise Kwan. She had worked for the foundation for 18 years. She survived, but rehabilitation would take months. The foundation was 8 weeks from its annual gala. The event funded art programs in public schools, after-school studios, and summer scholarships. Grace had left the foundation years earlier because working for her mother damaged both the job and the relationship. Margaret called me. "I need someone temporary," she said. "For what?" "To organize the gala accounts until Denise returns. You have an outside accounting firm. They prepare statements. They do not run events. Hire an interim controller. We do not have time." I almost said no. Then she named a consulting fee that would cover 2 months of my business payroll. I asked whether the board had approved bringing in a related party. She paused, then said the finance committee will. That needs to happen before I access anything. You really cannot help yourself. No. The committee approved a 6-week engagement. The scope was narrow. Reconcile gala vendors. Review donor pledges. Confirm mobile auction settlement procedures. Prepare a cash summary for the board. No audit opinion. No investigation. No authority to move funds. I made sure the contract said that twice. Margaret gave me an office in the foundation's converted townhouse. The building had marble in the entry and a copier that jammed every morning. The staff was smaller than donors assumed. Carla Ruiz, the event manager, knew every vendor and had not taken a full weekend off in 2 months. Carla looked at my contract and said, "Are you here to help, or are you here because she trusts family more than staff?" I do not think she trusts me. Good. Then maybe you will read things. The gala records were messy but not alarming. Deposit schedules, auction packages, sponsorship agreements, donor restrictions. The first issue appeared in a pledge ledger. A family named Warren had committed $200,000 for mobile art classrooms. The first installment had arrived. The second had not. The internal report still showed the full amount as available. I asked Carla, Mrs. Vale said to keep it in the projection, she said. It is not cash. I know. Has the program spent against it? Carla looked toward the hall. How much? Ask finance. Finance was Denise, who was in rehabilitation, and a part-time bookkeeper named Scott, who entered transactions but did not approve them. Scott pulled the general ledger. The mobile classroom fund was overdrawn by $112,000. Operating cash had covered the difference, and other restricted donations had then been moved into operations to fill the gap. Music scholarships, teacher mini grants, a mural program. Each transfer had a note, temporary program advance. I asked who approved them. Scott said Mrs. Vale and Mr. Sloan. Richard Sloan was the board vice chair. He had been Thomas Vale's business partner. He was 71 silver-haired and always photographed near Margaret. I asked for the board minutes. The minutes referred to cash flow management. No amounts, no restricted funds, no repayment schedule. I called Denise, not as the foundation's controller, as a professional courtesy. Her husband answered and said she tired easily. I told him the question was not urgent. Denise called me the next morning. Her speech was slower than I remembered from prior events. I asked about temporary program advances. She was silent. Then she said, Ethan, what exactly did Margaret hire you to do? Gala reconciliation. Then reconcile the gala. Are the advances documented? Another pause. Not well enough. Did the full board know? I cannot answer that. Can't or won't. Her voice sharpened. I am recovering from a stroke. Do not turn me into your source. I apologized. Before ending the call, she said, Look at the donor ledger, not just the general ledger. I did. The donor ledger was maintained by development staff. It tracked promises, restrictions, relationships, and conditions that did not appear in ordinary accounting reports. Next to several major gifts, a code appeared. LR. I asked Carla what it meant. Legacy reserve. What is that? She shrugged. A Margaret thing. The foundation had no account called Legacy Reserve. No board-designated reserve. No policy using the term. But donor notes showed nearly $900,000 tagged LR over 4 years. Some entries said, per MV flexible if needed. Others said, verbal approval to bridge. I checked the gift agreements. They were not flexible. They were restricted. The term Legacy Reserve was not an account. It was a private understanding Margaret believed she had with certain donors. I asked Grace whether she had heard it. We were in our kitchen. Lily was upstairs. Grace stopped cutting vegetables. Where did you see that? In the donor ledger. She set the knife down. My father used that phrase. For what? When a building project went over budget, he would ask close friends to let the family use pledges where they were most needed. Did they change the written restrictions? I do not know. That matters. I know it matters. Why did you react like that? Grace leaned against the counter. After Dad died, Mom found commitments he made privately, projects he promised to finish. She said the foundation had to protect his word by moving restricted money. She did not say that. Did you sign anything? Grace looked away. That was my answer. What did you sign? Board consents. Years ago. You are not on the board. I was secretary for 6 months after Dad died. How many? I do not remember. What did they say? Cash management. Bridge authority. I trusted Denise and Mom. I felt the room change. You never told me. You never asked whether I signed foundation paperwork before we met. That is not what I mean. I know. Grace picked up the knife again, but did not continue cutting. Do not investigate my mother as if she is one of your state contractors. I am not investigating her. You already are. I found restricted funds covering operations. Then tell the finance committee. I will. Privately. That depends on what I find. She looked at me. Ethan, please do not make a public example of her. I said I have not even decided what this is. But I knew something important. Grace's first fear was not that the children's programs had lost money. It was what would happen to Margaret. That did not make Grace dishonest. It made her a daughter. It also made her dangerous to rely on. I prepared a 6-page memo for the Finance Committee. No accusations, no conclusions, only facts. Restricted balances had been used for other programs. The board minutes did not identify the transfers. The donor ledger contained informal notes that conflicted with written gift agreements. The foundation's available cash was $280,000 lower than its internal report suggested. I sent the memo to Margaret Richard Sloan, the outside accountant and the foundation attorney. Margaret called within 9 minutes. "What is this?" "A cash risk summary. You are hired for the gala. The gala depends on an accurate opening cash position. You are creating alarm where none exists. The grants are restricted. The donors are friends. Friends change written restrictions in writing." She lowered her voice. "You do not understand how this family's commitments work. I understand how donor restrictions work." "Oh, that is exactly what I mean." Richard Sloan called next. He was warmer. "Ethan, I appreciate diligence," he said, "but foundation accounting is not state enforcement. I know. Margaret has covered shortfalls personally for years. Then those contributions should appear in the records. Some families do not invoice themselves for generosity. Did she contribute the money or lend it?" A pause. "Why would that distinction matter?" "Because loans create obligations." Richard laughed softly. "You are very much your reputation." "What reputation is that?" "The man who cannot see a room once he sees a rule." He asked me to meet for breakfast. I went. Not because I trusted him. Because people sometimes explain more when they believe they are teaching you how the world works. Richard chose a private club where I had to borrow a jacket. He ordered coffee and fruit. I ordered eggs and then regretted eating during the conversation. He told me the foundation had faced a temporary liquidity problem after Thomas died. Several donors delayed pledges. A building renovation went over budget. Margaret refused to cancel school programs because children and teachers had already been promised support. Richard provided a private bridge line through one of his investment companies. How much, I asked. "Enough! What interest rate?" "Commercially reasonable." "Is the board note in the files?" "It was approved." "By whom?" "Margaret, Denise, and Grace when she was acting secretary. Grace had not mentioned a loan." Richard continued. "The arrangement kept the foundation alive. There was no theft. There was no victim. Restricted donors may disagree. They got their programs. Some grants are underfunded now. The gala will restore them." There it was. The gala was not simply fundraising for next year. It was being used to fill old holes. "How much does the foundation owe your company?" Richard looked at his watch. "Ethan, I invited you to explain context, not submit to an examination. Then explain the repayment plan." He placed his napkin on the table. "Your business recently borrowed against your house. That is not relevant. It is completely relevant. You made a judgment under pressure. Margaret made one under pressure. The difference is that her judgment saved programs. My wife knew about your loan. Grace signed the original consent. Does she know the balance now?" "Oh," he did not answer. "I left before the food arrived. At home, I asked Grace directly, 'Did you sign a note with Richard Sloan?' She closed the laptop on her lap. Mom told me it was temporary. How much? $200,000 at first. How much now? I do not know. Did you read the note? I read the summary. That is not what I asked. No. She stood and walked to the window. Dad had just died. The foundation could not make payroll. Mom had not slept in days. Richard said the note was a bridge until pledges came in. Why did you hide this when I asked about legacy reserve? I did not hide it. I had not thought about it in years. Richard says the foundation still owes money. Her face changed. How much? He would not tell me. Grace sat again. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Then she said, if my signature is on something improper, what happens? I do not know yet. That means something happens. It means I need documents? She looked angry now. At me. At everyone who decides documents matter only after someone asks for them. That includes you. She was right again. My home equity line was legal. It was also a financial decision I had concealed because I was afraid. Grace had done something similar on a larger scale for her mother. The difference was not character, it was consequence. That did not make the conversation easier. We agreed on two things. She would search her old email and files for the consent. I would not contact law enforcement or donors without speaking to Foundation counsel. I did not promise silence. Grace did not ask for it. 2 days later, she found the document. The bridge note was not $200,000. It authorized up to $750,000. The lender was Sloan Capital Advisory. Interest was 9%. The foundation had pledged gala proceeds, unrestricted donations, and other available cash equivalents as repayment sources. There was no language allowing restricted donations. Grace's signature appeared as acting secretary, confirming the board consent. Margaret and Richard had signed the note. Denise had signed a certification that the borrowing did not violate gift restrictions. Grace stared at the page. She would never sign that if it was false. Maybe it was true when she signed, or maybe Mom told her it was. I asked, did the full board approve this? The attached consent listed 5 directors. Only 3 signature pages were present. Margaret. Richard. Grace's secretary? No other directors. Grace said Mom told me everyone had approved by phone. Did the bylaws allow that? I do not know. I requested the remaining signature pages from the foundation attorney. He replied that historical board records were being located. The next day, my system access changed. I could still view gala invoices. I could no longer view general ledger transfers or donor restrictions. Scott said Margaret had ordered permissions narrowed to my contract scope. She had the right to do that. It was also a message. Carla came into my office and closed the door. Something is wrong with auction settlement, she said. What? The payment processor normally settles to our gala clearing account. Margaret wants a backup vendor profile added. For what reason? She said if the bank freezes because of fraud review, we need continuity. Who is the backup vendor? She handed me a form. Hale Compliance Services, my company. The W-9 included my business tax number and an old office address. The bank instructions were not mine. I felt my hands go cold. Where did you get this? Margaret's assistant sent it. Oh, did you add it? No. I thought it was your arrangement. It is not, Carla said. Then why does it have your signature? At the bottom of the form was a digital image of my signature. It looked real. Because it was real. The image came from my consulting agreement. Someone had copied it. I photographed the form with my phone, then asked Carla to forward the original email to me. She hesitated. Will I lose my job? I do not know. That is not reassuring. I will not tell you it is safe when it may not be. She nodded. That is why I came to you. She forwarded it. The email had been sent from Margaret's assistant, Ellen Price. Ellen wrote that the backup vendor had been approved by Mrs. Vale and confirmed with Ethan. I had never spoken to Ellen about it. I called Priya Shah, the attorney who had handled a dispute for one of my clients. She listened to the facts and said, stop using foundation systems from your own devices. I need to finish the gala engagement. You need to preserve your position. If I resign now, they can say I created the vendor and ran. Then do not resign. Send a written objection to the vendor profile and copy counsel. I drafted it carefully. I stated that I had not requested or authorized Hale Compliance Services as a settlement vendor, the signature image was not applied by me, and the bank account was not mine. I requested immediate removal and preservation of all related logs. Before I could send it, Margaret walked into my office. She closed the door. Carla is confused, she said. About what? The backup account. It uses my company's identity. It was a contingency. For whose bank account? The funds would remain under foundation control, then use the foundation's name. The processor takes days to approve changes. Your company was already verified as a vendor. I am not a payment conduit. You would have been reimbursed for any tax consequences. I looked at her. That sentence does not make this better. Margaret sat across from me. Ethan, the gala must close without interruption. Richard's credit line matures at the end of the month. If we miss repayment, he can demand immediate payment and disclose the foundation's financial condition. So the backup account routes gala money where? To an account controlled by counsel until allocation. Which counsel? She did not answer. Margaret, whose bank account is on the form. You are overreacting. You put my tax number and signature on a bank instruction. You were going to be told. After the gala, I laughed once. Not because it was funny, because the alternative was shouting. She said, "You need the consulting fee. Your company needs stability. I assumed you would understand a temporary arrangement. You assumed I could be used because I needed money. I assumed family could help family. No. You assumed family would have difficulty accusing you." Her expression hardened. "Be careful. There it is." "What?" "The part where concern becomes a threat." She stood. "You have made a career of believing suspicion is intelligence. It is not. Sometimes it is only ingratitude." I sent the objection email while she was still in the hallway. Foundation counsel responded 20 minutes later. He stated he had not authorized the backup vendor and instructed the processor to freeze changes. Richard Sloan called Margaret. I could hear her through the wall. By the end of the day, the vendor profile had been marked inactive. I should have felt safer. I did not. The profile still existed. Oh, the bank instructions still existed. My signature was still attached. Priya told me to obtain a credit report, freeze new accounts, and notify my professional liability insurer. I did all three. The insurer asked whether I expected a claim. I said I expect someone to try. At home, I told Grace about the vendor form. She read the email twice. My mother did this. Her assistant sent it. Margaret defended it. Grace shook her head. She would not frame you. I did not use that word. You are thinking it. I am thinking someone created a way to move money under my name. Maybe it really was temporary. You do not borrow someone's identity temporarily. Grace walked away from the table. I said, "What would you call it if this was anyone else?" She turned. "What would you call borrowing $30,000 against our house and hiding it?" The comparison was unfair. It was also effective. I would call it a breach of trust, I said. So would I. We stood on opposite sides of the kitchen. Neither of us defended ourselves. Lily came downstairs for water. She saw our faces. "Should I go back up?" Grace said no. I said yes. Lily looked between us. "Great teamwork." She filled a glass and returned upstairs. The next morning, she texted me from school. "Are you and Grace getting divorced?" I stared at the message for a long time. I wrote, "We are having a hard time. You did not cause it. We will talk tonight." She replied, "That is what adults say when the answer is yes." I left the office early and met her after debate practice. We sat in my car. I told her no decision had been made. I did not tell her about the foundation. She said, "You always wait until things are almost broken before you tell people." Grace had said the same thing in different words. I asked whether Rebecca had said anything. "No, I have eyes." She looked out the window. "Is it money?" "Partly." "Is it Grandma Margaret?" I did not answer. Lily said that means yes. She knew the family too well. The week before the gala, the processor required final settlement testing. Carla Scott, the outside accountant, and I watched a $10 transaction move from a test auction to the gala clearing account. It worked. The backup vendor remained inactive. I checked the audit log. No changes. I prepared a final cash report showing the foundation could pay gala vendors, but could not both restore restricted balances and repay Richard's line in full. The shortage was $430,000. Not theft, a structural hole. Margaret read the report in silence. Then said, "Remove the section on restricted balances from the gala packet. The finance committee needs it. The gala packet is not a finance committee meeting. Then schedule one. After the event. Before settlement." She looked at me. "You are not chair." "No." "You are not trustee." "No." "You are a temporary consultant." "Yes." "Then finish the work you were hired to do." I sent the complete report to the finance committee under my contract. Richard replied that discussion would occur after the gala. The outside accountant wrote that the information was concerning and asked management for a response. Margaret did not respond in writing. Grace stopped sleeping in our bedroom 2 nights before the event. She said she needed space. I said I understood. I did not. At the gala, I arrived at noon. The ballroom smelled like flowers, electrical cords, and hotel carpet. Carla wore a headset and carried 2 phones. Margaret moved through the room correcting place cards and pretending the foundation was not $400,000 short. Grace arrived with Lily at 5:30. Lily looked older in her black dress. She hugged me quickly. Grace kissed my cheek. It felt formal. At 6, the mobile auction opened. At 6:10, I was in the ballroom helping a donor whose bidding app had frozen. At 6:14, someone reactivated the Hale compliance vendor profile. At 6:16, the settlement destination changed. At 6:22, the first batch of mobile donations was released. At 6:37, Scott noticed the clearing account had not received it. At 6:42, the processor confirmed $74,860 had been sent to the backup account. At 6:45, Margaret's attorney asked me to step into the service corridor. The transaction log showed my credentials. The authentication record showed a code delivered to my phone number. My phone contained a text at 6:13. Your verification code is 991204. I had not seen it. I had been helping a donor. The processor's website showed my account had been accessed from a browser I did not recognize. Margaret said he has access to donor accounts. Security escorted me to a hotel office. The police arrived 40 minutes later. They did not arrest me. They took a report, photographed my phone, and asked whether I had financial problems. I told them about the lost client and the home equity line. I watched those facts become motive in the officer's notebook. Grace sat across the room. When the officer asked whether I had ever concealed debt from her, she said yes. She also said I was not a thief. Both statements were true. That was the problem with facts. They do not arrange themselves according to loyalty. The gala continued without us. Margaret returned to the ballroom before the final appeal. Grace stayed with me until the police left. Lily was sent home with Margaret's driver. That decision became another argument later. I did not want Lily in Margaret's house. Grace said she did not want Lily alone in a hotel ballroom while police questioned her father. Neither option was good. Grace chose one without asking me. I understood why. I still resented it. At 1 in the morning, the processor reversed the transfer before the receiving bank released the funds. No money was permanently lost. That did not clear me. It changed the allegation from completed theft to attempted diversion. The foundation issued a statement at 8 the next morning. It said a payment irregularity involving an outside consultant had been identified and referred to authorities. It did not name me. The gala program and donor materials listed Hale Compliance Services as the temporary finance consultant. People did the rest. By noon, a local philanthropy blog had my name. By 2, one of my clients forwarded the article and asked whether payroll data was secure. By 5, 2 clients suspended my access pending review. My employee, Maya Chin, came to my office after everyone else left. She had worked for me 4 years. She said, "Tell me what happened." I told her. Not everything about Grace. Everything about the vendor form and transaction. Maya said, "Can you prove you objected before the money moved?" Yes. Then why is the foundation statement worded like that? Because they are protecting themselves. Are we paying Friday? Yes. From what account? The business line. She nodded. I need honesty, Ethan, not confidence. We can make 1 payroll. After that, it depends on clients. That is honesty. She sat down. My husband's insurance is through this job. I know. I am not saying that to make you feel bad. I am saying it because I need to know whether to look. Look. Her face tightened. Do you want me to leave? No. I want you to have a choice before the choice disappears. That was something I had failed to give Grace with the home equity line. I was learning slowly. Priya sent preservation notices to the foundation payment processor hotel, Margaret's assistant Richard Sloan, and the receiving bank. She also contacted my professional liability insurer and requested independent counsel. The insurer assigned a lawyer named Joseph Bell, who spoke in complete paragraphs and distrusted everyone equally. He said the central question was not whether I received the authentication text. It was how someone completed access without my device. The processor used password plus text code, no device binding. If someone knew my password and could see the code, they could log in elsewhere. How would they see the code, I asked. Joseph said, forwarding account, sync carrier access, shared devices notification previews, or someone physically looking at your phone. I changed every password and reviewed my mobile account. The Vale family office still had administrator access to our phone plan. A canceled request to add a connected message device to my line had come from the foundation office 3 weeks earlier. It was suspicious, but the carrier records did not identify who made it. The password had been saved on a shared conference room computer after a vendor meeting. I had made that mistake. Someone else had used it. It did not make the transfer my fault, but it removed the clean line I wanted between their scheme and my conduct. Grace stayed at Margaret's house with Lily for 3 nights. Lily called me the first evening. She said, "Grandma says it is probably a misunderstanding." What did Grace say? She says adults are working on it. What do you think? I think both of those are phrases people use when they do not want to answer. I apologized. She said, "Did you steal the money?" "No." "Are you sure you did not do something complicated that you are calling not stealing?" The question was unfair for a daughter to need to ask. It was also more intelligent than most adult questions I had received. I used our house credit line without telling Grace I said. That was wrong. I did not move the foundation money. I did not create the vendor form. I did not authorize anyone to use my company's name. Are you sorry? Lily was quiet. Then she said, "Okay. Do you believe me?" I believe that answer. It was not the same thing. It was what I had earned. Rebecca called the next day. She wanted Lily to stay with her until the investigation ended. I said no at first. Rebecca said, "This is not about punishment. She is reading articles about you at school. I can support her here. Your wife is at her mother's house, your clients are leaving, and you are meeting lawyers every day. She needs her father. She needs one house where nobody is asking her what happened at a charity gala." I hated the argument because it was practical. Lily went to Cincinnati for 2 weeks. She packed without making eye contact. At the door, I said, "You are not being sent away. I know. You can come back whenever you want. I know." She hugged me, then left with Rebecca. The house was quiet in a way that made every appliance sound broken. My business lost 3 clients in 10 days. Maya accepted another job, and I closed the rented office. The home equity line that had made me look desperate became the thing keeping the smaller business alive. There was no satisfying lesson in that. Bad decisions can still be useful. But Grace returned home after 4 days. She slept in the guest room. She had searched Margaret's study while Margaret attended a board call. I did not praise her for it. I asked whether she had taken anything illegally. She said no. She had photographed documents left on a desk she was permitted to use. One was a repayment schedule from the foundation to Sloan Capital. The balance was $1,380,000. The original principal had been $750,000. Over 6 years, the foundation had paid Richard more than $900,000 and still owed nearly twice the amount Grace thought it had borrowed. The note had been amended 4 times. Each amendment extended maturity and added fees. Grace's signature appeared only on the first consent. Margaret and Richard signed the amendments. Another document listed collateral, gala proceeds, future unrestricted gifts, a percentage of revenue from the Vale Center lease, and something called the Legacy Reserve Donor Pool. Grace said he has been charging the foundation to borrow its own relationships. Margaret agreed. She was trying to keep it alive. She was trying to keep anyone from knowing it needed saving. Grace sat at the kitchen table. She told me Dad left everything stable. Maybe she needed that to be true. She used my signature on the first note you signed because she said the board approved it. I know. No, you know the paper. You do not know what it is like when your mother tells you your dead father made a promise and you are the only person who can help her keep it. I sat across from her. You are right. She looked surprised. I continued. I do not know what that feels like, but you need to stop using the feeling as proof the decision was safe. Grace covered her face with both hands. For the first time since the gala, she cried. Not quietly. I moved toward her, then stopped. She reached for my hand. We sat like that for several minutes. It did not repair the marriage. It reminded us there was still a marriage to decide about. The receiving bank responded to the preservation request. The account on the Hale vendor form belonged to Orchard Fiduciary Services. Orchard was not Foundation Counsel. It was a small trust administration company owned by Richard Sloan's nephew. The account title was Vale Legacy Recovery Escrow. The authorized parties were Richard and Margaret. The $74,000 had been intended to repay Sloan Capital. Margaret had told the truth about one thing. The funds would have remained under a form of foundation control until allocation. But they were being diverted toward a private debt before the board reviewed the restricted fund shortage. My company's name was the cover. Richard's attorney claimed the vendor structure was a temporary processing mechanism created with management's understanding. Margaret's attorney said the use of my tax information was an administrative error. No one explained why my login had been used after I objected in writing. Joseph obtained the hotel's hallway and ballroom footage. At 6:09, I appeared near table 18, helping a donor. At 6:12, Margaret entered the service corridor with Ellen. At 6:13, Ellen left, carrying Margaret's clutch and her own phone. At 6:17, Ellen returned. The shared conference room computer was at the foundation office, not the hotel. Someone had accessed it remotely. The office network log showed a remote desktop session from Margaret's home IP address at 6:11. Margaret was at the hotel. Her housekeeper and driver were at work. Grace had been with Lily. Who was at Margaret's house? Richard Sloan. His driver's GPS and the house gate log placed him there from 5:40 until 7:10. Richard said he had gone to retrieve a speech Margaret forgot. The speech was in her hotel suite. The remote session used Richard's laptop identifier. That moved the investigation. It did not end it. Richard could have accessed the saved password. He still needed the text code. The text had appeared on my phone at the gala. The hotel security footage showed my jacket hanging over the back of a chair from 6:06 to 6:15 while I helped the donor. Margaret and Ellen walked past the chair twice. The phone screen was visible from above when notifications appeared. The code displayed in full because I had never disabled notification previews. The footage was too distant to show anyone reading it. At 6:13, Ellen paused beside the chair for 4 seconds, then continued walking. When investigators interviewed her again, Ellen admitted Margaret had asked her to check whether my phone had received a processor message because Ethan was busy. Ellen said she read the code aloud to Margaret. Margaret said she did not remember that. Richard's remote session entered the code 30 seconds later. That was enough for the Foundation's insurer. It was enough for my professional insurer. The police investigation remained open, but I received a letter stating I was no longer considered the primary subject. I read the sentence 5 times, then called Lily. She said, "Does that mean you are cleared? It means they are looking elsewhere." That sounds like a lawyer answer. It is the honest one. She came home that weekend. She walked through the door, looked at the boxes from my closed office, and said, "This is depressing." Yes. Good. I was worried you would pretend it was a fresh start. We ordered pizza. Grace joined us. For one evening, nobody discussed the Foundation. The independent board members finally acted after the insurer threatened to deny coverage unless management disclosed all debt and related party transactions. They hired a restructuring attorney and an outside forensic accounting firm. I was not hired. That mattered. I wanted to be the person who finished the review. I also knew my family relationships made that impossible. The board placed Margaret and Richard on administrative leave. Margaret refused at first. Then 3 major donors suspended future gifts. The foundation came close to collapse. Programs were transferred temporarily to a larger nonprofit, scholarships were delayed, and 2 staff positions disappeared. When people said no child had been harmed because the money was restored, I thought about the teachers who waited for supplies and the employee who lost her job. The forensic report took 4 months. It found no evidence Margaret had taken foundation money for personal shopping, travel, or gambling. That disappointed people who wanted an easy villain. It found something more ordinary. Margaret had spent years refusing to admit the foundation could not afford the promises attached to her husband's name. She used restricted gifts as internal loans. She accepted Richard's expensive bridge financing without full board approval. She changed donor reports to delay disclosure. She instructed staff to classify private debt payments as program support. And after I objected to the vendor form, she allowed Richard to use my company identity and login credentials to route gala proceeds toward his loan. Her stated reason was to prevent default and public scandal. Richard's reason was simpler. He was making money. Sloan Capital had earned more than $600,000 in interest and fees. Several amendments charged fees for covenant violations Richard already knew would occur. The report concluded he had used his board position to influence borrowing from his own company without independent review. Grace's original consent was criticized, but not treated as intentional misconduct. She had signed an incomplete record while grieving and relying on representations from Margaret, Richard, and Denise. Denise's role was more complicated. She had objected in emails that were missing from the foundation's active server, but recovered from backup. Margaret told her the board had approved the transfers. Richard told her donors had given verbal flexibility. Denise signed certifications she should not have signed. She also spent 3 years trying to force repayment while protecting staff payroll. Her stroke was not caused by the foundation, but reading her emails made the pressure visible. There was no single innocent adult. There were different degrees of fear, power, and responsibility. The board scheduled a special meeting to review the report. The meeting was not public. Council, insurers, donors' representatives, and affected officers attended. I was invited because the false vendor profile used my company and the report needed my statement. The room was a plain conference space at a law firm. No chandeliers, no microphone, no screen large enough for a dramatic reveal. Margaret sat across from me. Richard attended by video on advice of counsel. Grace sat behind the board table as a former officer and witness. I described the consulting scope, the donor ledger findings, the vendor form, my written objection, the gala transaction, and the damage to my business. Margaret's attorney asked whether I had concealed a home equity loan from Grace. Yes. Were you under financial pressure? Yes. Did you save your password on a shared foundation computer? Yes. Did you leave your phone unattended at the gala? Yes. Then your own conduct created the opportunity. It created access, I said. It did not create authorization. He asked whether I believed Margaret intended to steal the $74,000 for herself. No. The room shifted. He expected me to say yes. I continued. I believe she intended to use my company's identity to move money toward a debt before the board and donors could stop it. She believed protecting the foundation's name justified using mine. Margaret looked at me. For the first time, she appeared tired rather than controlled. The board chair asked her whether she had authorized Ellen to read the text code. Margaret said I told her to confirm the processor message. Did you give the code to Richard? I told him settlement was available. That is not the question. Margaret's attorney touched her arm. She pulled away. Yes, she said. Grace closed her eyes. Margaret continued. I believed Ethan had already obstructed a necessary payment. Richard said the vendor profile was valid and the funds would remain protected. You knew Ethan objected in writing. I believed he did not understand the consequences of default. The chair asked, did you believe his objection gave you permission to use his login? No. Then why did you? Margaret looked toward the windows. Because if the foundation defaulted that night, Thomas's work would have ended as a scandal. Grace said quietly, it ended as a scandal anyway. Margaret turned toward her. I was trying to preserve what your father built. Grace replied. You preserved the name and spent the work. No one spoke for several seconds. That was the closest the meeting came to drama. The board removed Margaret as chair and trustee. Richard resigned before the vote and later settled civil claims with the foundation. He repaid part of the interest and fees and was barred from serving as a fiduciary for the organization. The district attorney charged him with unauthorized computer access, attempted theft by deception, and falsification of business records. Margaret was not charged with stealing foundation money. She entered a diversion agreement related to the unauthorized transaction and identity misuse. She paid restitution for my legal expenses, the foundation's investigation costs, and losses tied to the gala incident. She also contributed enough personal money to restore the remaining restricted balances. To do that, she sold the Napa property Grace had spent summers in as a child. Grace cried when the sale closed. Not because she wanted the house. Because consequences often arrive attached to memories that did nothing wrong. My business did not return to normal when I was cleared. 2 clients came back, the rest had moved on. I rebuilt from Lily's old playroom with smaller nonprofit and municipal clients. The company was smaller and less dependent on one account. Grace and I separated for 7 months. Not because she believed I stole the money. Because the gala exposed problems that existed before it. I hid financial fear. She protected her mother through silence. We both called it protecting the family. We both had meant protecting ourselves from a conversation. We went to counseling and did not move back together because of one apology. We made rules, shared access to debt and savings, no family documents signed without independent review, no using Lily as a messenger, and no saying, I did not tell you because I was protecting you. Grace added the list to the refrigerator. Margaret moved to a smaller condominium. She and Grace did not speak for 3 months. Then Margaret sent a letter apologizing for using Grace's signature involving Lily and treating my identity as expendable. To me, she wrote, I believed your need for the consulting work made your objections negotiable. I believed the family name was more vulnerable than yours. Both beliefs were cruel. I read the sentence several times. I did not forgive her immediately. I did not send the letter back. A year later, Lily invited Margaret to a debate tournament. They spoke for 5 minutes afterward. It was not reconciliation, it was contact. The Vale Youth Arts Foundation no longer exists as an independent organization. Its programs now operate under a regional community foundation with outside financial oversight. The Vale name remains on one building because removing it would have cost money the program needed. Margaret is no longer on the wall of trustees. Grace serves on a program advisory group with no authority over funds. She says that is the right amount of power for now. People who heard the story online often describe me as the auditor who trapped his wealthy mother-in-law. That is not how it felt. I did not set a trap. I accepted work because my business needed money. I missed a saved password on a shared computer. I left notification previews visible. I had concealed debt from my wife and gave an accusation somewhere to land. Margaret did not wake up planning to become a criminal. She made one exception to protect a promise, then another to protect the first exception. Then she needed false reports, expensive loan staff, silence her daughter's signature, and finally my name. Richard saw every exception as a fee. Grace saw every warning as a threat to her mother. I saw every inconsistency as something facts alone would solve. We were all wrong in ways that fit who we already were. The donor ledger did not expose a secret casino account or a closet full of luxury purchases. It exposed something more common. A family had confused reputation with responsibility for so long that they could no longer tell which one they were saving. The night of the gala. Margaret believed my name could absorb the damage because hers carried the foundation. She was wrong. Names do not absorb damage. People do. My employees did. My daughter did. Grace did. Foundation staff and teachers did. Margaret did too. I still audit organizations. I still ask for documents people call unnecessary. But I no longer tell myself that finding the truth is the same as taking care of the people living inside it. That part comes after. It is slower. It does not fit in a spreadsheet.